Welcome, everyone, and good afternoon. My name is Stephen Liss, and I'm the Vice President, Research and Innovation at Ryerson University. It is my pleasure to be able to tell you about the upcoming session, the second of two sessions today on the future of work. This session focusing on skills for a greener future, put on by the Future Skills Center, which we are proud to host at Ryerson, and to introduce our moderator. But before I begin, I'd like to recognize and acknowledge the land on which the university resides and from where I'm participating in today's session. Toronto is in the Dish with One Spoon territory. The Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and the Haudenosaunee that bond to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. The land acknowledgement reminds us of the important work of reconciliation that is ongoing, the need to address historic wrongs, and it captures our need to chart a meaningful path forward in a collaborative manner. The Future Skills Center, or FSC, is an active research center focused on innovating and testing what works in skills development, for whom and in what context, to help prepare Canadians to navigate our rapidly changing global economy and labor markets. FSC is funded by the Government of Canada's Future Skills Program and launched in 2019. FSC is a consortium that includes our partners at Conference Board of Canada and Blueprint ADE, while our Ryerson colleagues at Diversity Institute and Magnet are also integral parts of delivering FSC's mandate. At the heart of FSC's work is a commitment to supporting Canadians who have been historically excluded and in disadvantage in training and labor market opportunities. But to be clear, our underlining tenet is that we ensure that no one is left behind. No Canadian is to be left behind. That means supporting individuals to gain skills that they need to be resilient and prosper, but also addressing systemic barriers and working with employers to ensure pathways into jobs and to advancement are inclusive. As the world confronts the collective impact of climate change and its effects on the livelihoods of communities and future generations, Canada will look to do its part and leverage innovative approaches in skills development as a solution to these challenges. How will we ensure that Canadians whose livelihood are tied to economic activity that will inevitably decline as transitions to a low-carbon future are underway are not left behind? Does Canada have what it needs in terms of skills and talent to capture the opportunities of the future in this space and become a world leader in the development of key technologies that help mitigate the most disastrous potential futures? Today's panel will reflect on questions such as these and offer more directions based on experience and expertise. To moderate our discussion, it is my pleasure to introduce Mike Moffat, Senior Director, Policy Innovation at Smart Prosperity Institute, who will moderate this important conversation. Mike Moffat is the Senior Director of the Smart Prosperity Institute and an Assistant Professor in Business, Economics, and Public Policy Group at Ivey Business School, Western University. In 2017, Mike was Chief Innovation Fellow for the Government of Canada, advising Deputy Ministers on innovation, policy, and emerging trends. He was also previously holding titles of Director in term of the Lawrence National Centre for Policy and Management and Chief Economist for the Mowat Centre at the University of Toronto. Mike has worked with politicians and policymakers of all political stripes in several countries to craft more effective public policy. From 2013 to 15, Mike served as an economic advisor to Liberal leader Justin Trudeau. Over to you, Mike, to moderate and to introduce our panelists.
So much for that kind introduction. So again, my name is Mike Moffat. I'm the Senior Director of Policy at the Smart Prosperity Institute. And I have the pleasure of introducing our three panelists. So I will go one at a time, and let's start with Samir.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. My name is Samir Khan, and I am Senior Research Associate at the Future Skills Center based out of Ryerson University. And I am leading and supporting a lot of our research and evaluation work, particularly around green sector transitions and green sector skills transitions. And looking forward to the discussion today.
Fantastic. Well, next we'll go to Jenny Peters from Eco Canada.
Thank you, Mike. Jenny Peters. I am the Senior Research Manager for Eco Canada. We are an organization that supports the development of environmental workers across Canada. And my work focuses on a labor market information collection and development of national occupational standards for the environmental sector. I'm very glad to be here to join the panel today.
Glad to have you here today. And now, and last but certainly not least, Vince Schutt from the Canada Green Building Council.
Hello. I wear a couple different hats. So one that I wear here is I'm the leader for the Workforce 2030 Coalition that's looking at how do we bring up the workforce needs, the ability to supply the green building promise that we all need in order to be able to meet our GHG targets. And so there's a really big element of HR development that needs to happen there. And then I'm also a partnership and learning advisor at CSPC. And with that, I do a lot of work with experiential learning and how do we actually look at how people learn and how do we help them get from point A to point B. So that's me. Thank you for having me.
Well, let's get to our learning today. But before we launch into our session or our discussion, we want to get your thoughts on a green future. So we have launched a Mentimeter. I hope I never pronounced that right. Mentimeter question, and ask that you take a few minutes to share your thoughts. So we've shared the link in the chat box, or you can use your smartphone to scan the QR code on screen. And you can see our question up here. It's when you envision a green future, what words come to mind? So I'm going to leave a couple minutes here for people to capture or people to let us know what are the words that come to mind when you see this question. All right, we've got some equity, sustainability, technology. Let's see if we have any words that don't end in Y. Ooh, electric cars, there's one. Okay. Oh, I saw there's one in the discussion forum as well. Clean air. Yes, that would certainly be a benefit. So why don't we move on here while this goes on? We'll I think we can start our panel discussion. So I've got a number of questions, and I'm going to give the first one to Jenny, but I want to hear what our other panelists think as well. So Jenny, climate change is impacting the way we live, work, and survive. So what do you envision a green future to look like?
Oh, that's an excellent question. I think from my perspective, in talking to environmental workers and people who are passionate about developing a low carbon economy, is it comes down to it's a sophisticated world with advanced technology, new innovative ways of doing things, and a creative space for, I guess, humankind to come together in support of our basic needs and the protection of the environment.
I'm gonna pass that on to Vince. So we've heard about protection of the environment. So how do you and the Canada Green Building Council play a role in that?
This is I really want to riff off of where Jenny just started, because we have these pictures going forward into the future of this bright future, and we've got this climatology, this glaciology telling us, well, communicating this risk, but we also see that the response right now is kind of slow and there's resistance. But we have other science, and this is a big science conference, right? We have clinical psychology, we have social psychology that teaches us about ourselves. And not only does it understand that resistance, it predicts that resistance. We know that that resistance is going to be there. And not only do we know that that resistance will be there, we also know what to do about it. We know how to resolve that resistance. That's what psychologists have been studying, like Bill Miller and Stephen Rolnick since the 1980s have been studying this, built on the work of Carl Rogers. So when I look to the future, I look at how we integrate types of behavioral sciences into the built environment. Like, just to give me one quick second to give you a quick example. Imagine you're a homeowner and you want to get your home retrofit. Now you go and you get an energy advisor who's going to stick a giant blower door and like right on your door, it's going to suck all the air out, and they're going to bring in a heat gun, an infrared heat gun. They're going to see, oh, you need insulation here, you got leakage there, you got leakage there and everywhere. And they're going to give you a laundry list of what you need to fix in your house. And then they leave. And you're left with this list going, holy crap, what did I get myself into? So that's the point where we need a little bit of confidence boosting in order to get a little bit deeper into that list. And without that confidence, we're not going to. So this is where some of the behavioral sciences can help us to actually get some of the green targets, be them buildings or whatever your green target is. The behavioral sciences can help us get there.
Fantastic. So, Samir, I think you and the work of the Future Skills Center can give us a confidence boost as well, because obviously there's always a little anxiety about change and how that's going to affect the way we live and work and survive. So, could you let us know how you and the Future Skills Center view this issue?
Well, I mean, as you're alluding to, Mike and Vince and Jenny, this is a pretty tall order, and I think, you know, fundamentally, when we think about the types of changes we're going to need to make to achieve a kind of a greener future or to achieve net zero goals, I mean, the world of work is where a lot of these considerations are going to play a role. So, how do countries innovate to undo what we've done? How do we reduce the impact of what we really can't stop doing quite yet? And then how do we mitigate those coming changes? And how do economies support those kinds of lines of thinking? I think when we think about it from our perspective, we're focused on skills development as part of our mandate. And we see kind of, you know, a vision that coordinates between kind of three different types of audiences. So one is government and training experts. There's a need to kind of create the kind of qualification infrastructure, the likes of which Vince and Jenny and other partners are working on, so that we can be aware of new trends and transition relevant issues at the occupational level. And we're going to need to be able to inform policy decisions at the allocation of budget sort of level, so that we can make these needed investments to make sure that all of these systems are in place. I mean, I think employers and workers, I think Vince and Jenny are working on these issues really, really at the forefront of them. But they're going to need information about what present and future skills requirements are going to be required to make, you know, current work processes and future work processes less carbon intensive. And then I think on the vocational guidance and employment service professional side, we need to support these people that guide workers through these processes with really solid quality information. And that's challenging, but we're getting there. And I think, you know, bringing all of these things together, we need to kind of bring together macroeconomic sort of analysis. Where are the jobs going to come from? At the sectoral level, how are sectors going to change? And then, you know, at the skills and occupational level and the education training provider level, what kind of changes do we need to do and make in our current way of operating that's going to facilitate a lot of these changes? So it's a tall order, but there's some big picture issues to start thinking about.
It absolutely is a tall order, and as you point out, both Vince and Jenny are on the front lines of this. So I'm going to go to Vince as someone who is on the front lines. How is the Canada Green Building Council addressing these skill challenges in the context of green economy transitions?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the easiest things to talk about is one of the Workforce 2030 partner projects that we have. It's actually with the Future Skills Center. And so we've got Mohawk College, Labor Education Center, Toronto Community Benefits Network, and Building Up. So 4 partners, all looking at delivering pre-apprenticeship training for people just coming into the building trades. And so these programs pre-existed. So we're looking at these saying, okay, well, how can we look at these pre-existing programs and how can we add onto them like green curricula to make sure that these people going through these programs are going to be ready for the building future that's emerging rather than the building, current state or the building industry of the past. So we have cohorts rolling out all this fall, our first sets of cohorts, and happy to say that Mohawk College has now got a micro credential specifically in the area, and so they're rolling out their first cohort with that. And Toronto Community Benefits Network, their Quick Start program has the first all-female cohort going into that, which may not seem like that big of a deal, but in an industry like the building trades, which is sitting at somewhere between like 4 and 7% female, having a 100% cohort, training cohort is an accomplishment that we're very proud of. So just looking forward to many more. And when we look at that training, once again, you got to get that experiential stuff in there. Got to get their hands on it and use the best practice techniques that we have so that when they go out into the building industry, they are ready. And thanks.
I actually would like to ask you a follow-up on that because I think it's really fascinating that you sort of linked green skills and challenges to existing issues around sort of EDI and inclusion. So how did you do that? How did you manage to, or you and Mohawk and others, sort of identify these issues and manage to come up with an all-female cohort? That's absolutely fascinating.
So I mean, well, really, the first thing is you just have to really commit. You have to realize that there is the need. You have to look at who is present in the space. You have to say somebody's missing. And how do you actually start to get those people? You have to understand the lived reality of that person that is the target audience that you're trying to go after. So like, are we actually providing childcare resources to potential students? If we're not, how are we going to actually try to include more women in the workforce? Are we providing training on safety? Are we preparing builders to be able to create a more empathic environment that's going to be safe for women and help them to experience a positive view of a new career instead of one where they go forth and they're continuously in fear of having workplace harassment. So we need to be able to look at these things in a sober view and start to address root causes and really get at what are the needs of this audience and actually like meet them in the classroom.
That's wonderful. And I'm going to ask Jenny a very sort of similar question, again, as another group on the front lines dealing with labor market issues and also, dealing with a variety of stakeholders who are often from marginalized and vulnerable communities. What is your role and the role of Eco Canada in addressing these skills challenges for a green economy?
Well, thank you. The Eco Canada is focused entirely on developing the environmental workforce. So we have a number of different programs that are developing opportunities for individuals to find the training that they're looking for, recognizing people's credentials as environmental workers, providing wage subsidies for new entrants into the marketplace. But I think one of the most exciting areas where we're contributing is in the development of or research into the types of competencies that are involved in environmental roles. I think our experience is that environmental jobs are hard to define in some cases. It's not clear who should be considered an environmental worker or why that they should be included in that group. And from our perspective, individuals who are in two different categories count as environmental workers. Those individuals who require specific environmental related skills, knowledge, competencies, aptitudes in order to do their job, regardless of what industry they're in. So individuals who are in working for mining companies or oil and gas companies, but who are tasked with environmental protection, sustainability, environmental growth. These are individuals who we count as environmental workers, who I think in a lot of cases, some people would not think of people working in mining or oil and gas as environmental workers. We also are well aware that individuals who are working for organizations that are environmental in nature, so those who are providing environmental goods and services, are all types of individuals are needed in order to support those organizations. So while there are individuals who are scientifically inclined or doing engineering work or that sort of development and innovation, we've also got individuals who are on the business development side of things, who are on the administrative side of the organization, who are integral to the activities of that particular organization. From our perspective, we would include those as environmental workers as well. So unfortunately, from the perspective of research, that makes it very difficult for us to capture the entire marketplace of environmental workers. So we tend to segment it out and look at individual sections. Like, for example, the blue economy, sustainable blue economy research that we're doing right now with the Future Skills Center. Our focus there is to identify what roles are developing and emerging in the blue economy that are going to be required in order to ensure the sustainability and the growth of the ocean sector in Canada. And there we're finding occupations that are very traditional, fishermen, ship captains, and that sort of thing. We're also finding subsea miners or individuals who are doing robotics with underwater vehicles. So there's a wide range of different individuals in that marketplace. We're trying to capture as much as possible what the skills are going to be required to ensure that the jobs that are needed in the blue economy are going to be met going forward. We're developing some competencies, we're developing some training frameworks, we're developing some potential certification around those competencies, and that all falls into this great project that we're doing with the Future Skills Center.
Well, it's an excellent segue, because I find these questions interesting, like what is a future skill and what is a green skill? And I know Samir and his team spent a lot of time thinking about that. So Samir, could you tell our audience about the work of the Future Skills Center around these questions and in general the challenges in the context of green economy transitions?
I think it's a hard act to follow after listening to what Jenny and Vince have been talking about in terms of what's going on in their projects and the granularity that you need to understand at the worker level what these transitions are going to be like. I mean, in addition to those two projects, which I think are really interesting, there are a few others that I'd highlight that aren't necessarily obviously green transition projects, but we call them that because they involve transitions out of sectors that are transitioning. So we have a really interesting project, two interesting projects with Energy Safety Canada and Calgary Economic Development on the Edge Up project. And those are looking at helping the transition needs of displaced oil and gas workers into either new opportunities in a changing energy sector or into different sectors of the economy, IT-related professions. And I think what's interesting about both those projects is we're trying to take the existing capabilities and expertise that people have working in those sectors and think, in what ways does skills development help them make that transition, which is, I think, a hugely important issue that Canada is going to face. When you look at the scale and the pace of transition and the geographic distribution of that transition, these are going to be big issues. So those are two kind of small pilot projects. I think we, going forward, there's one other project I'd highlight that is not obviously a green transition project, but it's research that we supported with Mike and our Smart Prosperity Institute and our colleagues with the Diversity Institute, which looked at the labor force impacts of declining manufacturing in Ontario. And I think the lessons from that sort of project, I think, hint at directions that we need to be thinking about in other transitions that are coming forward. Just about the nature of work, how it changes in the sector, how the occupations change in the sector, and who's affected. Going forward, I think we're looking to deepen our work here. It's obviously really important, the pace and scale of what's going to happen in Canada. Mike will be able to speak to this much more thoughtfully and with much better numbers than I have access to right now. So we're going to explore a couple of things. I mean, I think we want to continue building the evidence base to support the kind of decision making that I'd outlined among different decision makers at government, at education training providers, at career development professionals. So we want to support research that will help build that evidence base. I think we also want to deepen our engagement at the community level, helping communities that are, let's say single company towns that are going to really get hit hard and are already getting hit hard by current transitions and transitions that, maybe are not facing them right away, but might be facing them in 10 years. And so how do we think about helping those communities manage very holistically things like housing, things like what sort of skills we need to put in place to get started on either green economy or other kind of economic activity. And I think we'll be supporting, we're looking forward to supporting more of that work going forward because we recognize that that's really where these challenges sort of are going to be faced. And that's where actually the most complicated sets of incentives and different stakeholders and different interests really need some unpacking, need some facilitation and support.
Thank you for that, and thank you for plugging the manufacturing report. It's a fantastic report, but I'm biased because I wrote it with generous support from the Future Skills Center. And I always said, obviously we love the work that the Future Skills Center does. I think your name sort of belies a little bit about what you do because you do so much more than skills. I think the future part is important. So, what are you seeing and the center seeing as the other issues impacting the ability of Canadian workers to take advantage of those opportunities that we know about right now? So I'm going to go back to Samir for this question.
I mean, thanks, Mike. And I'll take a first stab. And obviously, I think a lot of people are going, I'm going to be drawing on things that you have said in other fora, all of you have said in other fora, and some other thinking that we've been sort of wrestling with. They're kind of interlocking sort of issues. I think spatial issues I kind of alluded to earlier. I think the consensus is that we're confident that there's going to be a lot of opportunities that Canada can leverage. But in terms of where they're going to be and what does that mean for people, families, households, I mean, these are really tricky questions. And so we're less sure about where the opportunities are going to be, how far people are going to need to move or think about the transitions within their own communities. Are they going to have the right skills? Are they similar to what's available in regions? These are all huge issues. And I think that relates to a second kind of big issue. And this is not necessarily a green issue. This is, I think, an economy-wide issue. Mike, you've done a lot of really important work, especially looking at this on an Ontario level. I keep on giving you kudos, but you've done a lot the thinking here. Housing and transportation, I think, are going to continue to be huge issues. And where workers can afford to live to access these opportunities is a huge factor. If you think about workers working in shop floor occupations, entry-level services that kind of support how these sectors function, this is where, Southern Ontario is facing huge challenges, for example. I think this is what Mike's research sort of points. And this is worrying because this is where a lot of the green tech opportunities exist currently. This doesn't just also apply to the workforce, current workforce relationships. I think there's also something about where people access skills development opportunities that needs to be thought about. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about online learning has kind of broadened some aspects of the reach of education. But I mean, I think we're all still very locked in a world where, centers of excellence in education and training kind of form these regional clusters. And there's strong connections between employers and education training providers for the economy as it exists now. But maybe it's hard to predict and think and plan about what the economy of the future might look like. So that's those are kind of two very important issues. I think it's really great to hear equity and inclusion issues discussed. And maybe I'll throw out one statistic, which is, again, not necessarily a green economy statistic, but it's a worrying one. I think you might be familiar with this 2015 Ontario Society of Engineers study, which found that, and this astonished me, 50% of women with engineering degrees from outside of Canada were unemployed. And if you think about the labor force needs in opportunity in green economy sectors where that type of skill level might be valued, to have kind of that level of unemployment speaks to potentially a larger issue where we need to think about how do we avoid replicating inequalities in the current labor force in the future economy. And I think we have to think about this much more than just supporting groups through these transitions. I think this is also about working with employers to think about how they can tackle some of these issues in their HR practices, in what they consider as qualifications to perform these types of work. So it's both a supply and demand side issue in the labor market context. So those are three issues. I hope that helps.
There's a lot there, and again, thank you for promoting my reports, both the ones we did for Future Skill Centers and the ones we've done on our own. And so, Samir, you're absolutely right that our research that we've done shows that we're going to need to build a lot more homes, a lot more housing, and a lot more other things. And when I talk to home builders, they always say, "We don't know how we're going to do that. We don't know how we're going to find the people." So I asked this question to Vince, partly just to inform my own research. So I will be taking notes here. But how do we do this? What are those issues that are impacting the Canadian workers to take advantage of the opportunity in the construction industry and in building in general?
I mean, it's really a great cue, and you're setting me up really good here.
There you go, just put it right on the tee.
So, I mean, one of the first things that I want to say is when we look deeper into it, at a root cause, I think that we have to address, number one issue is the culture. So if our parents are telling young people, hey, you should be a doctor or lawyer or whatever, or you should be an engineer or architect, then it's like, well, what about carpenter? Like, what's wrong with carpenter? Carpenter, like, there's, literally, like, we have so many retirements happening in the building trades that, like, and people are like, oh, I graduated with a master's in environmental studies, and it's just like, am I going to be able to get a job? I have a master's in almost fill in the blank, and it's just like, are your work prospects actually better just doing something like carpentry? And also, this is a green job. If you build a greenhouse, or you build like you do a retrofit, like take something like the Ken Sobel Tower in Hamilton. This building was retrofit to have a 94% reduction in energy usage. So reaching like some of the highest standards that we have for energy use, such that on the coldest day of the year or the hottest day in the summer, the peak energy that you'll ever need to be able to maintain this home at a comfortable temperature where you can be very happy is 3 light bulbs. That's the peak energy. So how do we get people into there? So that like, so the first thing that I really want to address here is access. We must always address access. Whenever people aren't there, there's, okay, so picture you are in Toronto and you live in Scarborough. And look, it's a free program for you to learn how to get into the building trades. The program's in North York. So in other words, you have a 3-hour trip by transit up to North York and a 3-hour trip back. You need to pay for transit fare. You need to figure out how the fact you're going to be able to take a break away from whatever you're doing right now to get money. So that you can take 12 hours every single time there's a class so that you can get up there to do it. You need to take time away from caregiving for elderly parents. You need to take time away from caregiving for young children. Also, maybe you're not confident that you can succeed in this career. All of these are access questions. So when we tone on our empathy and we say, why aren't people coming here? And we actually go ask some questions and really get in and start listening, we start to come up with a pretty big long laundry list of why they're not there. And then we can just start, kind of like at the fair, like just shooting them down one at a time. Boom, boom, boom. We just got to knock those things down. And each one of those barriers that we knock down, more people can come in. And one of those barriers that I kind of wanted to do, this was a story that was just told to me just the other day. There was a mid-high level management woman in a building company, and she audited all of the standard operating procedures within the entire organization. This is a primary builder, I'm not going to say their name, and they looked for man hoist, manpower, management, all of the words that, and you could just look at the he, him, all the pronouns, everything, all of the written text of the entire organization was he, and audited all that and made it gender neutral so that this is a place that can be inclusive. And is that like the only step? It's one of 100 things that we have to do, but we have to start somewhere. That's, I think, really what I've got, which is look at access and look at how we systematically address barriers and start to navigate them.
Well, this is a great segue to the question I want to ask Jenny. So, about this need to start somewhere and the need for action. So we saw world leaders gathered at the UN Climate Change Conference, COP26, and they discussed actions and commitments needed to tackle climate change. So, what do you think that corporations and government and educational institutions and NGO, what role do they play to accelerate goals and prepare the workforce for a greener future?
Well, I think the biggest step that they can all take is to get out of their silos and start collaborating with the other stakeholders. Having corporations working closely with post-secondary institutions to ensure that the needs, the skills needs, the aptitudes, the knowledge that they need from the graduates coming out of post-secondary schools is what is required for the workforce is essential. Making sure that the government is aware of the ways in which our policies and procedures may be acting as barriers to development of green products or commercialization of those products. Having the industries cross collaborate. We talked about the oil and gas sector broadening to become more of an energy wide sector. having energy as a broader sector enables individuals who have backgrounds in oil and gas development to move into some of these tidal wave or tidal space or wind power offshore or other types of energy resources. So a lot of it has to do with the knowledge that's within organizations has to move beyond those organizations in order to facilitate better decision making and growth going forward.
Well, fantastic. Absolutely. You know, it's sort of my role in innovation. The importance of knowledge spillovers cannot be overstated. But I think there's also one other thing that we need, and that's coffee. So what I'm going to suggest is we take a 5-minute break to stretch, get a mug of coffee or a glass of water, and then we'll come back. And during that 5 minutes, I'd like you to think of some questions that I could ask the panelists, or otherwise I've got a few of my own up my sleeve. So let's take a 5-minute break. We'll meet back here at 2:30 and do a round of Q&A. Okay, I think we're live here. Yeah, there we go. I can see myself now. So we're live. So again, I invite anybody from the audience, please feel free to send in questions, and I'd be happy to ask. But in the meantime, I only asked Jenny my question about COP 26 and the role of educational institutions and NGOs and other organizations. So I will ask Vince that question, because I know in an event like this, you always sort of have pre-meetings, and I know Vince has some thoughts on this that I found interesting. So I'd love to have him share them publicly.
Sure. Well, why don't I actually share these two links in here into the chat. You'll have to copy them and paste them manual because the links don't work. But I want to just discuss what we're looking at here. So the first one, the one that's the Obama White House. So this is a link describing one of the executive orders that Obama put into play during his presidency. And so where this came from, basically he invited a bunch of behavioral scientists. They got in there and they did a discussion to kind of just show some of the science that's there and what this can actually do for government. And a lot of what government does is behavior change. A lot of what we need in the environmental space is asking people to make a change. In instances like, I kind of like to think of climate change as like 8 billion people that need to change 1,000 behaviors, only one of which is, well, like probably 100 of which is something to do with their home, and then 900 other behaviors. But what's interesting is, earlier you said spillover. There's actually a research paper from Nicole Sintov that says if you help somebody in the home to start composting, then 9 out of 9 other behaviors measured that are also sustainability behaviors increase. 5 out of those 9 sustainable behaviors have a statistically significant increase. In other words, just by helping somebody to get to compost more in the home results in a predictive accuracy for them to be uptaking active transportation, so walking and biking more. So there is a lot of space here, and our agencies, our governments, and our organizations need to look at how we can apply that. So that's the first link. And the second link is a report. And I'd like to, if you click on it and go there, I'll just talk about one image, and I can kind of even see it in my head. It's on page 16 on the top right. And this is looking at how do we frame what we are doing. So up to this point, governments, organizations, nonprofits, whoever you are, when we frame our environmental initiatives, we frame low carbon, less energy usage, reduce your carbon footprint, less, less, less. Does anybody feel excited? Do you want to go out and rally for that exciting doing less of something? That's not really very exciting. When you did the like the big word cloud thing, somebody said clean air. That was the last thing that I saw that got added. So this actually is a values-oriented frame that our evidence shows is going to be much more effective at helping people come on board. So clean air, if what we want is clean air, well, then let's actually retrofit our buildings. Well, what do you want if you want to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions? Oh, we need to retrofit our buildings. So the answer is the same. It doesn't matter why. So let the why be the strongest why for the most people. And that is the health why. And you will see the evidence for that in this report, the second link, that we need to look at positive frames like improved efficiency, high performance buildings, improved health, improved safety. And that is how we get to the greenest built environment.
It's fantastic. Yeah, the importance of behavioral economics and nudges and all of those tools. So we have a really interesting question here in chat. I'm almost afraid to ask it because it's a really tough one, but actually the professor in me wants to ask it because it's a really tough one. A lot of times that, you know, in our decarbonization discourse, you know, there are few industries that get a lot of attention, you know, that like the energy industry, buildings, often transportation, EVs, and so on. So our question is about health services and healthcare. That it does actually have a significant greenhouse gas footprint, you know, from buildings and ambulances and a variety of different areas. So, you know, I'll let you guys off the hook a little bit. You can talk about healthcare, or you can talk about sort of other industries that are a little bit off the radar. You know, are there important, you know, how do we train for those green skills that aren't the really obvious ones that we would see on the front page of the Toronto Star or the Globe and Mail?
I mean, I think this sort of speaks to a point I tried to make, and you know, it was early and there's like all sorts of technological things happening. So I don't know if I made it that clear. But this notion of like integrating climate or green sensitivity into just every single aspect of work, I think is really, really important. Healthcare, you know, I can't speak to it. And, you know, when you mention it, I mean, you think of the amount of emissions in just the production of equipment that you use and dispose of in a healthcare context. I mean, I think it becomes clear what we're sort of dealing with. You know, another one that occurs to me is something like the insurance industry, which has probably grappled with this issue earlier than most, but insurance, finance, you know, how do you incorporate climate impacts into the skills you use to analyze whether to loan to a particular group or an industry, or what to invest in, or how to insure something. This is where I think for these kind of like, not just the front line of those skills, the clean economy skills, but all the support and finance and kind of just you know, everything we do has a climate impact. And so how do we think about working differently, and what kind of incentives and behavioral change, what's the mix of things that need to really facilitate those transitions across the economy? I mean, those are big open questions, but I guess that's the big picture that we're sort of facing with anyway.
And I know Jenny's on the front line of this, so I'm gonna kind of cold call you here a little bit. You know, so Jenny, because I know, you know, Eco Canada, you know, you're in a variety of you know, different sectors. So, you know, how do you make sure that those sort of green skills can be across sectors and in ones like healthcare and others that you wouldn't traditionally think of as necessarily being at the forefront of the sort of race to net zero?
It's an excellent question, and one that we have to address ourselves. I think one of the best and more successful ways that we've had to ensure that the green lens is placed on operations and business is to get the heads of the organizations on board. If you can do a lot to encourage individual workers to think green or to act in a sustainable manner. But until you've got the buy-in of the head of the organization, often those efforts are at cross purposes. So I think one of the great opportunities we have is to bring leaders of, say, post-secondary educational institutions together and say, okay, so we know that post-secondary institutions are often on the forefront of developing more sustainability in their organizations. How do we take that information, how do we take those learnings and apply them across other industries, bring the leaders of those industries together and sort of develop a best practices that can be followed?
Right. So that's phenomenal. That leaders, different leaders need to lead, and I think that's incredibly important. We have our leaders initiative at SPI that involves corporate and NGO leaders kind of coming together. That solutions don't just come from government, and they even don't just come from policy think tank wonks like me. That we all have to play a role, and as part of playing that role, we need information and we need sort of resources and we need knowledge. So I would like to call on each of you to share one or two resources. I know Vince has as well, but I'll still open this up to him if he's got a couple more. But what are the sort of resources that have helped you learn more about the sort of intersection of skills and approaches and solutions to a green future? And that could be a book, an article, a paper, discussion, podcast, you name it. I think I saw Samir kind of move forward. So do you want to go first on this one? Or were you trying to hide?
Well, it depends on the context. I think here I'm just trying to find, actually, because it was sent in the link. It was the report from the Canadian Institute for Climate Choices, the Sink or Swim report, which I think was a great macro level view about how transitions impact just about every sector of the economy, and some really interesting projections about where workers are likely to be affected and what populations are going to be drawn from. I think one thing I learned that was really interesting, and again, with the issues of equity and inclusion in mind, is that it's actually Indigenous populations working, out west in oil and gas and mining, who are, going to bear a disproportionate burden of a lot of the transitions that we kind of hope for in the energy sector. And so when we, I think, highlighting both the opportunity, which that report does really well, but also highlighting the very specific and regional and contextual challenges that we need to start thinking about, I think that was really instructive, and I encourage people to have a look.
Okay, so we have the Sink or Swim report, and I can't recommend that highly enough. That is a fantastic report. So I recommend everyone check it out. It's a real, I like it because it looks at both threats and opportunities. And it said, look, the world is decarbonizing, for better or worse, that's a thing that's happening. That's going to affect Canadian sectors and Canadian companies within sectors, so they need to be ready for that, and the communities as well, where those clusters occur. So, Sink or Swim by the Institute for Climate Choices. Vince, do you have any additional resources for us?
Sure. So I thought about, like, if there was one last thing that I wanted to share that's just like a favorite link or a favorite thing, then this is something that I proselytize this. So is everybody ready? Are you ready for this one? Okay, so there it is. Okay, so I love knowledge translation and grabbing research from different places and saying, hey, that's relevant to everything I do. And so what I just posted, it's an article called When and Why Incentives Don't Work to Modify Behavior. So here I go on the behavior again. What's the connection this time? Picture the built environment and what we are trying to do as Canada Green Building Council. We want to retrofit 14 million homes. We want to retrofit 500,000 multi-unit residential and commercial buildings and industrial buildings. How are we going to do that? Right now, the leading way to do that is to just do gigantic gobs of money at people until they're buried, and that's supposed to get them to actually make a change in their behavior. This paper shows that throwing gigantic gobs of money at people is actually disincentivizing. So we need to actually look at, instead of throwing money at people, maybe just talking to anybody who knows anything about behavior change, and maybe making a slight adjustment to the policy, instead of spending literally hundreds of millions of dollars to buy new windows for people, that is going to reduce their energy use by maybe 3 to 4%. So that's basically my big thing there. So let's look at raise the woke instead of just burying people in money. And please take a look at the paper. It's wonderful.
Well, this is fantastic because I have not seen this. So this is great. I am learning about a new paper that I was not aware of. So thank you for that, Jenny. So what resources do you have for us?
Well, I didn't bring any specific resources because I rely on so many different sources of information in order to keep up to date with what's going on in the environmental sector. But I do want to encourage people to go out and find all of those free webinars that are now being made available online, from international organizations to local groups. We've got discussions going on about specific types of technology, like the hydrogen impact on the global marketplace, or the development of wind power in Atlantic Canada, or the transition of oil and gas workers into other sectors. Each of these webinars, even if they're technical, I find provide a lot of good information about the decision making that goes on behind the scenes, the behavior and the factors that are influencing people to make that change. And that is information that I draw a lot of insight from.
Oh, that's fantastic. So would it be rude if I sort of plugged an upcoming webinar we have? I feel like Jenny sort of opened the door. Well, you know what? I'm going to do it anyway. And I think it's easier to beg forgiveness than it is to ask for permission. So I'm going to put this in the chat. We've got a webinar coming up next week that's free to attend, called How Can Health Considerations Drive Climate Action? It actually speaks to a lot of the things Vince has been talking about selling the benefits. I'm now actually feeling a little guilty, Vince, that we didn't ask you to be on this panel. We may have to next time. So I would just agree with Jenny that there's a lot of great free material out there, webinars, podcasts, that kind of thing. So it's never been a better time to be able to access information at relatively low cost. Unfortunately, I dropped my notes here. So, sorry about that. So now I'm done plugging my own work. I think it's now time to plug Future Skills Center's work a little bit. So first of all, though, I would like to thank our panel, Jenny, Samir, and Vince, for sharing their thoughts. I've learned a lot. I know our audience has as well. And as well, so I see here in the discussion forum that there is an upcoming Future Skills Summit in February. Actually, since we got a bit of time, Samir, can you tee that up for us? You probably have more details than I do.
I'm going to actually pass this over to my colleagues who are on the phone. We have, it's not on the phone, they're on the chat. So there's some links to some conferences and summits that we are going to be hosting, namely the Future Skills Center conference in February. The other thing I'd like to highlight is that we put out a call for expressions of interest for research on quality of work issues. Again, not necessarily a green sector specific issue, but thinking about the overall framework under which people are participating in the labor force, what incentives are apparent, and how is that changing over the COVID period. So we're looking forward to engaging on both of those things. And we encourage you again to register for the Future Skills conference, which will be in February of next year.
Well, fantastic, and I see the chat as well that there's you can stay informed with all the fantastic work the Future Skills Center is doing by joining their mailing list. I am on it, and I always enjoy hearing from FSC. So again, I just like to take this opportunity to thank our panelists and thank the Future Skills Center for putting this wonderful panel together, and we will see you all soon.